It's a part of who I listen to on a daily basis. And it has gotten so much louder than my ego has. But it started out with these silly little things of grab your umbrella, grab a coat. And if you're watching this video, I know you have that remembrance or voice within that says those things. Welcome back to One's journey of unwinding the mind and, of course, your daily microdose. Now tune in to the latest episode of One's journey. Today's video I'm excited for. It's actually a request from one of your fellow patrons, and maybe you're the one, but today we are going to talk about listening to your gut, aka the Holy Spirit. Along this journey, it oftentimes gets confusing because the ego has been such a strong representation in our life, and the ego isn't always negative. The ego is duality. So it could be super high highs or super low lows, but it's something, an opportunity to always intervene and fuck up your life. It's always an opportunity to have things coming crashing down and to have that other shoe drop, right? That statement. When the other shoe drops. But the Holy Spirit is actually your highest self. It is the you as spirit. It is the mind, what is projecting all of this out. So, in fact, it's the same thing as the Holy Spirit. It's just sometimes, I've heard it said this way, that it feels a lot cooler to have a sidekick with you, right? The Holy Spirit, to have this external entity to identify with. And that also goes to be with Jesus, right? Because Jesus is one with us. We are Jesus. He just happens to be the big brother in the projection that figured it out before us and is waiting for us to lean on him and his expertise, which is saved in the mind, which is saved in the highest self or the Holy Spirit. It's there to access whenever. Went down on a tangent. That is a video for a different day. Back to, how do we know if it is our gut, the Holy Spirit, or if it is the ego? So my first response is you don't always know. I think on this journey of getting to enlightenment, there will be times that you slip back into the ego and you listen to the ego. But remember, this is a script you are following. So if that occurs, do not beat yourself up. Do not place weight on it because it was all a part of the process. Maybe that slip at that point saved you down the road from an even larger slip of making a much more impactful decision. Who knows? We don't know. We can't see the whole picture, but the Holy Spirit and your highest self can. So that's why we must trust. I would say in order to know that it's actually the Holy Spirit and not the ego is, am I coming from a place of love? And not ego love. Ego love, there's a video on that, but that is conditional. That is when we get into the 5 love languages. I can only accept your love if you do this, or I can only give love if it looks like this. Not that kind of love. I'm talking about the unconditional love and the understanding we are one, and what you do for others, you do for yourself. And not in a selfish manner, but in the manner of understanding the compassion and seeing your brother for your brother instead of your brother and his ego belief. So unpack it that way. Is this out of love or is this attack? And sometimes you have to ask yourself like a few whys deeper to truly uncover what the truth is. And I've talked about this in a past video because there's a very wealthy person who claims they love to work. It is their passion. They work like 18 hours a day and that they're coming from a place of love. Possible. My theory is that, in fact, if we went 7 whys deep, you would find out that it's actually coming from a place of fear. Because at one point, this person was homeless living in their car, and their girlfriend said, hey, if you don't get your shit together, I'm leaving you, right? So now every time their bank account hits a certain number, and I think it might be close to $1 billion by now, it's this fear of, now I can't drop below this number. I can't drop below this number. So they literally spend their entire life working when in reality, this is just an illusion. So what does it matter in the end? Either way, it doesn't. But the purpose is, are they coming from the ego or the Holy Spirit? Because what does matter here is to forgive at the level of the mind so that we can reconnect with the Holy Spirit, remember we are one with it, and wake up home in heaven, not wake up here again in some hospital, right? I don't want to do that next after this lifetime. I would like to wake up in heaven. I don't know about you. That's up to you. That's your choice. But essentially, it's just really getting honest with yourself. And that's why awareness is step one, understanding why you're making decisions the way you are. Because we talk about as well that in order to change and choose different, you first need to identify how the ego is showing up in your life. What decisions are you making? What interactions are you having? What thoughts are you thinking that are actually coming from the ego? And once you really have been on that journey for a while, you know at least the baseline of when the ego creeps in. And it may not be the exact thought, but it's the way you feel. It's that internal feeling of grossness, like this doesn't feel right. And I asked Patrick before I did this video today, I was like, hey, how do you know when you're coming from a place of the Holy Spirit? And his was a feeling of inner peace, which is so true. It's calm in regards to it, and it's not that dualistic high or low. The ego wants to pull us into that duality where we can be crushed. The Holy Spirit wants to keep us at that even keel happiness and peace that is internal. So if there's extreme excitement, I always tell my clients, if you're jumping into the duality roller coaster, you know the roller coaster goes high, but it also goes low. And it's like you've signed that contract to experience both. But again, Patrick said it's a feeling of inner peace. And sometimes when I'm so much in spirit, and I know I am, it's like I almost start crying, and not sad crying. It's one of those cries where it's just like brings this like well of warmth and love, and it's just like so overpowering. And those are the times I'm like, shit, this is what it's going to feel like when I go to heaven. But it's almost like I get scared at first, like, oh, this is a lot of love. This is a really lot of love. And it slowly pulls away. And I think that also is a part of the journey to enlightenment is we can't just flick a switch and go from living in this ego world of sacrifice and separation and that being normal to like this immense love and just peace and happiness within, because it'll freak us out. It's a gradual switch. And I'll be honest with you, some of the first times I ever felt that, it kind of freaked me out. I was kind of like, whoa, what is this? And I was not on drugs. I was completely sober. But again, I have no clue where I was going on that tangent. I hope that was helpful. But back to what Patrick said, it's a feeling of inner peace. That's where I was going. It's a feeling of inner peace. And for me, sometimes it even wells up and I just feel this super extra love, but not always. And the interesting thing, I'll do another video on this maybe, or maybe I'll cover it now, is early on in my journey, before I really stepped in, I used to have this like voice in my head or this knowingness where I'd leave for the day and it would be like, grab an umbrella, grab a coat, and I would ignore it. I'd be like, I'm running late. I'm already on my way out the door. There's no rain outside. And sure as shit, every time I didn't do it, at some point when I was away from my house, I needed one of those things. Not needed them, but wanted them. They would have came in very handy. And when I finally started to begin listening to that voice, was I was living in St. Pete, and it was shortly after I moved here, and I was getting ready to go to the local coffee shop, and it was mid-afternoon, and it was like, go in and put some deodorant on. And I was like, why? I already put deodorant on today. I haven't been outside, blah, blah. So I'm walking down the street, I get to the coffee shop. P.S. It's hot as F down in Florida. And I get there and I'm like, what the fuck? And I smell my armpits. I had forgotten to put deodorant on. So it wasn't this nuisance of putting another layer on. I believe it was my highest self, even though it's not necessarily some sort of major gain, but I think it was my highest self or the Holy Spirit's way of starting to get me introduced to listening. And I finally started listening. And at first it felt irritating, right? Because it happened a lot. multiple times it would be like, grab this, grab that. And sometimes I didn't need it. I would probably say 85% of the time when I listen, it was beneficial later. But there was some time it wasn't. And I feel like, not that the Holy Spirit tests you, but I felt like it was like, are you going to keep listening? Even if there is a time you don't actually need it. And now I'm to the point where it's not a nuisance. I don't even realize I'm like, it's just a part of it. It's a part of who I listen to on a daily basis. And it has gotten so much louder than my ego has. But it started out with these silly little things of grab your umbrella, grab a coat. And if you're watching this video, I know you have that remembrance or voice within that says those things, like go check the toaster, go turn off the light or whatever. And I'm not talking about OCD, right? I've experienced that in my life too, where it's like flip off and on the light switch 20 times. No, because this voice doesn't also say if you don't get your coat, you're going to get into a car accident. It's just, hey, grab your coat. And the question is, do I listen? And the more I listened, the louder it got, and the more beautiful my journey got. And it led me to the Course in Miracles because I listened to that voice. And I'm guessing you're only here because at some point you listen to that voice as well. Because let's be honest, this isn't easy to hear. And it's not something that people just seek out. Listening to your gut, the Holy Spirit, how do you know it is the Holy Spirit and it is not the ego? Go back, get deep. Ask yourself the questions. Is it from a place of love? Is it a place of attack? You know, like the coat in the umbrella, that causes no harm in anyone. So, of course, that would always come to a place of love because it's just love. They had no attack. It was like, get your umbrella in case you need to attack someone. And just starting to bring that awareness in all the things you do and listening to that little voice inside. And you'll be surprised where it leads you. And then acknowledge it when all of a sudden you heard yourself remind you to bring your coat and you needed your coat. Be like, oh, thanks. I did need that. And that's what I did. And it's so beautiful to reflect back on it. And I appreciate you submitting this request because I think this is often a question I get on podcasts and other things because, well, how do you know? Like many people think the ego is this like egotistical, money-driven X, Y, and Z, when in fact the ego is the duality, right? The highs and the highs and the lows and the lows. Share if that little voice is showing up and how you've listened to it. When there's some really interesting times it showed up, like my deodorant, and you didn't listen to it, and are you on the path of listening? And are you making it a point every day to listen more so that you hear it more? As always, thank you so much for being a part of this. Until next time, remember you are worth it. Much love.